Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy.
Hello, and welcome to the midweek bonus episode of The Politics Guys. I am Justin Holmes, professor of political science at the University of Northern Iowa, and I'm joined today by Ken Katkin, who is a professor at the Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. And we are going to cover a few other of the plethora of political happenings this week that we didn't get a chance to talk about in our main show. This is one that is available to our supporters. If you enjoy that, find your friends and tell them, hey, they should become supporters so they can get even more of this. And how are you doing today, Ken?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back.
Likewise. All right. So shall we jump into it?
Yeah. So I guess the first story we're going to talk about, it being May, is graduations. There's been a lot of university graduations taking place over the last week or two, and there's been a lot more fireworks than usual at some of them. And I guess what I'm talking about, of course, is that at many graduations at universities where there's been controversy around pro-Palestinian protest activity, a lot of which controversy has been greatly aggravated by interventions from the White House and from Congress. I think several universities were trying very hard to keep those controversies out of their graduation ceremonies. They were vetting ahead of time what all the speakers planned to say. They were telling them that if they wanted to say anything about Palestine, they were not going to be allowed to speak. In some cases, some speakers who were vetted nonetheless violated those agreements and did say things about Palestine. In some cases, universities reacted very heavy-handedly about that, including, taking people that a minute ago had been valedictorian and now saying you're not even going to graduate. And even those kind of heavy-handed responses do not seem to have satisfied the Trump administration. And these are causing even more investigations for universities. At Columbia University, which is, famously was the first university to start a process of capitulating to the Trump administration, their new interim president was roundly booed by all the graduates. And meanwhile, while all this was going on, or just after it, this morning or yesterday, President Trump announced that he was rescinding Harvard's right to admit any international students, which I think right now you're talking about something like a quarter. If you count graduate students and professional students and postdoctoral students, probably about a quarter of all the people at Harvard. And that was already enjoined by a court today. So that's a lot to chew on. But, how should we talk about all this stuff? How should we think about it?
Oh, gosh. These are the things that are on my mind as an academic during graduation season, I suppose. Yeah, I think the Columbia situation with graduation was the one that really seems to have garnered kind of the most attention. And I think it is important to think about that as sort of a backdrop or against the backdrop of the already tense relationship that Trump has with Columbia. I think it seems to me on some level that, Trump wanting further investigations, I think he was looking for any pretense of being able to do that. And so, unfortunately, this gives him a pretense. Whether rightly or wrongly, Columbia's reaction there, I don't know how they would have stopped what happened from happening. I mean, this, even if you side with the position that gosh, they should be doing more about, aligning with Trump, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they had a discussion, they had an agreement, the student broke the agreement, there you go. I think that there is kind of a long history of controversies at some universities with, students wanting to make a political statement as part of graduation. And I think it's a big audience. The kinds of students that are kind of chosen as valedictorians and representative speakers, whatever they are across campuses, tend to be people that are very passionate about causes and very engaged in a lot of things. And so this is not entirely to be unexpected. In particular, these are people that are graduating after quite a bit of protest around Israel, Palestine, et cetera. I'm a little bit of two minds of these, I suppose. Certainly, I've got a pretty strong free speech streak, and kind of anything that gets in the way of that kind of honks me off. On the other hand, having just been to graduation myself this last weekend, one of the things I appreciated was that our student speakers were kept mercifully short. These are long sorts of things, and we don't even have like an outside speaker or anything like that, which is delightful. But there is sort of on the one hand, I mean, there is kind of a time and place, sort of thing here that, is this the right moment to be talking about this? On the other hand, I certainly think that a statement like that is hardly worth, refusing someone a degree over, or revoking their title, or what have you. It's a little unclear what's going to happen with the student here. Given that it's a private university, I suppose they can place, sort of whatever restrictions they might want, on what happens in those speeches. But at the same time, it does feel awfully heavy-handed and just a response that is perhaps disproportionate to the perceived offense.
Yeah, and actually, I don't think Columbia is denying any student of their graduation, but some other universities did that.
In fact, Columbia had maybe talked about it at one point, but perhaps that has fallen by the wayside in the meantime.
Right. But George Washington University is doing that. So
maybe that's where I'm confused.
Yeah, the student speaker at George Washington was Cecilia Culver, who was a graduate. She graduated with a statistics degree. She was one of the student speakers, and she will be banned from the campus and from all university-sponsored events. At NYU, that also happened. The student's name was Logan Rozos, and he will be denied his degree for having talked about Gaza in his graduation speech after agreeing not to. At Columbia, I think the reference that a student speaker made to Gaza was very brief, and Columbia didn't discipline them for that. But at Columbia, the bigger thing that happened was that a large percentage of the graduating class booed the president the whole time that the president was speaking, and that was related to the president's stance on the encampments and on the protests around Gaza.
Grandpa's here.
Hank's always helping out, Grandpa style. Now he's treating his prostate cancer with help from Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
Also, another thing I knew about the Columbia graduation, because I was friends with some parents who tried to go there to see their own daughter graduate, is that at the campus, Columbia is an urban campus, and so it's mostly got walls all around it. But there's probably about a dozen places normally where you could there's gates and you could walk in. But they had all but one of them closed this time. So all gates were closed except for the main gates. And that was because of security. And so many, parents and other people were trying to get in through the main gates that the lines got to be 7 or 8 hours long. And yeah, a large number of parents never got in, including the parents I knew here who traveled all the way from Cincinnati to New York to watch their daughter graduate. They were never able to get onto campus for the graduation. They stood outside for about 5 hours and then the graduation was over. And so that was that. And so that was another kind of aspect of it was extremely fortified. There were hundreds and hundreds of, New York City police in SWAT gear with riot masks and things like that all around, even though there was no riot. And so it's, that's a whole aspect of, I think, the understanding like everything that was going on is it was very, very militarized kind of graduation.
Yikes.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I would say too. And I was also going to maybe respond a little bit. The one thing you said about it being a private university, of course, I agree that they could set their own criteria. And I also agree with what you said that maybe this wasn't, if I was the graduate, I would not have used this opportunity to push my own political issues. I would have thought that was not the right thing to do. But I don't think that the universities are really, just making their own private decisions here. I think they're very much being threatened and intimidated by the Trump administration, and that's motivating the crackdowns more than just, I don't know that I'm sure they wouldn't have been happy for these kind of speeches or protests, no matter what. But I think the sense that they have to really respond very, very forcefully, I think, is because they consider that they're under the gun from the Trump administration.
I think that context really is important. Yeah, I mean, this is somewhat coercive. I mean, I'm drawing a blank on specific examples, but I feel like every year or two we have some, somebody says something and it's a whole brouhaha, at a graduation because people do it. But yeah, I mean, that's without the the backdrop of threatening to take your university into receivership or what have you. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question of what constitutes good manners or bad manners for a student is really a debatable question in this context. But I think the question of whether a student should be denied a degree after working for years to earn it, based because someone thinks they had bad manners, I don't think that's really debatable at all. I guess that's how. I
mean that's absolutely my position.
Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, I mean. Yeah, it's one of those things. I tend to roll my eyes at things like that occasionally, but I mean, there's a sense of proportionality here. I mean, 4 years and geez, what's 4 years at Columbia these days? I mean,
it must have cost $300,000 or something like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And been a lot of work. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, to threaten someone over that, or GW is, I assume, a very similar sort of situation. So. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say on that apart from it happened and it's concerning, but I think it fits into sort of this broader these broader swings at higher education with kind of Columbia and now especially Harvard being kind of in the crosshairs of the administration. And so Harvard, Columbia pretty much capitulated instantly, more or less, and Harvard, they decided to take the fight back to Trump, and you probably shouldn't honk off the university with the large law school network of alums that are high-powered lawyers. But he had a really, it was about 3 weeks ago now, this really over-the-top micromanaging sort of plan for Harvard, and they basically sued him, and it's tied up in the courts. But then yesterday, I was in a meeting of academics, and there was kind of a gasp as everybody's alerts popped up. This new move to essentially end their ability to enroll foreign students. And so, it's a little unclear if that's enroll new or if that's everybody goes home. And I think it may well be the latter. But as we kind of mentioned a second ago, certainly what's happened here is, of course, they immediately sued the administration. There's at least a temporary injunction, kind of blocking this. What do you think, Harvard's ability to push back through the legal system? What do you think their chances look like?
On this one, they've essentially, I think, already won the whole case. We were talking earlier about emergency dockets, and they did already win an emergency ruling in just a few hours after they filed the complaint. And I think it's just, I don't see any way that they don't maintain that all the way up. I could talk a little more about that, though. So, one thing about Harvard and Columbia, which, you framed it, I think, in the ordinary way to frame it, which is that Trump made a lot of unreasonable demands on both universities. Columbia decided to capitulate. Harvard decided to fight. But, it's a little more nuanced than that, because despite Columbia's decision to capitulate, Trump never accepted that. He never released any of the funds that he was impounding against Columbia. So they didn't really gain anything from their capitulation, if it was capitulation. But also, I don't know that they really did that much. It was much more theatrics, like they announced that they were capitulating. And it's hard to know what Trump even wanted exactly. Like, a lot of his kinds of demands are very, very vague. And so it's hard to know what it meant for Columbia to capitulate. It's hard to see that they gained a single thing by doing it. Now, Harvard, by kind of, I think similarly going to court, but also really publicly announcing that that's what they're doing, that they wouldn't capitulate, that they kind of, that was like painting a target on their own backs for Trump. And he's trying more and more ways to retaliate against them. And so the first bunch of stuff basically had to do with Trump impounding a lot of funds that the government had already awarded to Harvard. Most of that was in the form of grants for medical research. So the lion's share here is you've got medical researchers with big labs working on cures for cancer and vaccines and things like that. And they've done, gone through competitive peer review processes and been awarded multi-year grants. And Trump just started impounding a lot of that money, really with no real justification. And so Harvard sued about that. Now, in a case like that, where Harvard is saying we're entitled to receive this money and the government's not paying it, it's hard to get early results, because the case will just have to be tried. And then if Harvard wins, they'll get the money. There's really nothing for a judge to do right up front at the beginning of the case.
Sure.
Yeah. Whereas now what Trump did was he said, and you had it right in terms of what the order was. He said, well, I'm not going to even let Harvard access the government's computer network anymore that universities use to verify that people who are here on student visas and who have told the government that they're here to be full-time students at University X, that they actually are enrolled as full-time students at University X. So, at my university and yours, if we have international students, then they've been awarded a student visa and they've said, I'm studying at NKU or I'm studying at NIU. And then NIU or NKU has to get on a computer system that the registrars have and say, yep, these students are here. Yep, they're enrolled as full-time students. And then that's what keeps the visa valid.
We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters-exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo, we're @politicsguys, or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes, as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com, and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,